At a quiet bus stop in Jackson, Mississippi, a decorated black veteran was humiliated when a deputy tased him without cause. The young officer, desperate to prove his authority, mistook cruelty for strength, and the crowd watched in outrage. But what he didn't know was that his victim wasn't just any bystander. He was the commander of the city's SWAT team. And only listen to how this shocking injustice turned on its head, and why, in the end, justice stood tall. The air in Jackson, Mississippi hung heavy that Tuesday evening. The sun had just dipped behind the horizon, leaving a haze of gold and shadow across the quiet street. At the corner, beneath a flickering bus stop light, stood Colonel Marcus Hayes. 70 years old, his presence still commanded respect. His shoulders were square, his jacket neatly pressed, and a small row of service medals gleamed faintly against the fading light, silent proof of decades of sacrifice. To anyone passing by, he looked like a man of dignity, waiting peacefully for his ride home. But not to Deputy Chad Wilkins. Chad's cruiser rolled up with a screech that cut through the calm of the evening. He was young, restless, and carrying the weight of his own insecurities. Earlier that day, fellow deputies had mocked him for not being tough enough, for failing to assert dominance on the job. That sting still burned in his chest. Now, spotting Marcus alone at the stop, Chad saw an opportunity, not for service, but for power. He stepped out of the car, voice sharp, posture exaggerated. ID, now. His hand hovered over his taser, as if the request wasn't a question, but a threat. Marcus turned his head slowly, calm in the face of hostility. His voice was steady, deep, unwavering. "I'm just waiting for the bus. There's no reason for this." But Chad didn't hear the words, only the echo of the laughter from his colleagues at the station. His pride, bruised and desperate, demanded a show. And then, in one reckless instant, zap! Marcus collapsed, his body jolting before hitting the concrete. Gasps broke out around the bus stop. A teenager fumbled with his phone, recording. A mother shielded her child's eyes. People froze, not because they had never seen force used before, but because of who it was used against. An elderly man, a decorated veteran, struck down without cause. The charge that surged through Marcus's body wasn't just electricity. It was a surge of something deeper, something uglier, the unmistakable sting of injustice. A war hero, a man who had spent his life protecting others, now lay on the ground at the feet of someone desperate to prove himself. And the crowd knew this moment was wrong, terribly, painfully wrong. Marcus lay on the sidewalk, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. The cool pavement pressed against his cheek, but what cut deeper than the fall was the sight before him. Children staring wide-eyed, teenagers holding up their phones, and mothers pulling their sons and daughters close as if shielding them from a lesson too bitter to watch. Deputy Chad Wilkins stood over him, lips curled into a sneer. He muttered under his breath, loud enough for the nearest onlookers to hear. "Maybe now you'll learn some respect." It wasn't the sting of the taser that hurt Marcus most. He had felt worse in combat zones halfway across the world. It was the sting of humiliation, of being reduced not by an enemy on the battlefield, but by arrogance wearing the same badge that was meant to protect the people. For a fleeting second, his mind drifted back to nights overseas, where he commanded soldiers through life-or-death moments, his voice steady even under fire. He had bled for his country, led men who trusted him with their lives. And now, he was forced down onto the concrete of his own hometown, not by circumstance, but pride and ignorance. The crowd stirred. A whisper grew into a murmur, passing from one witness to another. "Wait, isn't that Colonel Hayes? The man who runs the SWAT team? Oh my God, it's him!" Phones tilted higher, recording every second. What began as a scene of abuse was turning into something much bigger, because people were realizing who exactly had just been targeted. But Chad didn't notice. His pride shielded him from reality. He thought he had put an old man in his place. What he didn't know was this: he hadn't just tased a bystander. He had just assaulted the chief commander of the city's Special Weapons and Tactics Unit. And that truth was about to change everything.
The crowd held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. The street was still, except for the faint hum of streetlights, until suddenly the darkness was split by a blaze of headlights. Not the bus. From the opposite end of the street, a line of black SUVs rolled in, engines low, their movements precise. The insignia on the doors gleamed under the lamps: SWAT. Brakes screeched softly as the vehicle stopped in formation. Doors swung open in unison, and out stepped officers in full tactical gear. Their weapons stayed holstered, but they didn't need to be drawn. Their presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere. Authority radiated from them, not the shallow kind Chad had tried to wield, but the kind born of discipline and unity. At their lead was Captain Elena Brooks, a seasoned officer whose reputation in the city was as solid as her stance. She didn't hesitate. She cut straight across the pavement, her boots striking sharp against the ground, every step brimming with purpose. Her voice sliced through the stunned silence, steady and commanding. "Deputy, do you have any idea who you just assaulted?" The words landed heavier than any siren. Chad's confident smirk cracked. His eyes darted wildly, from the crowd to Marcus to the line of SWAT officers now closing the circle around him. His throat tightened, his hand dropped nervously from his belt. And there, with quiet dignity, Marcus Hayes pushed himself up, supported by two community members who rushed to his side. He straightened his jacket, adjusted the medals that still glimmered faintly on his chest, and locked eyes with the deputy. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried the weight of battles fought, men led, and respect earned over a lifetime. "Son, I've led men into real combat. You wouldn't last a minute." The effect was immediate. Gasps gave way to cheers. A ripple of applause surged through the crowd, growing into a roar of approval. In that moment, the power flipped. No longer was Marcus the victim on the pavement. He was once again the commander, standing tall while the deputy shrank under the weight of his own mistake. Justice wasn't waiting in some far-off courtroom. It was here, alive in the street, carried on the voices of the people and the presence of the very team Marcus led. The tide had turned. The aftermath was swift. Under the eyes of both the public and Marcus's own SWAT officers, Deputy Chad Wilkins's badge was taken from his chest, his taser locked away. There was no argument, no way to spin what had happened. The truth was already captured from every angle on cell phones and streaming across the internet. By sunrise, the video had spread beyond Jackson. Headlines blared across the state. Talk shows replayed the footage frame by frame. Outrage was universal. How could a man who defended his country be treated with such disrespect on his own city street? The sheriff's department had no choice but to act. The very next day, a press conference was called. The hall was packed, reporters jostling for position, community leaders seated shoulder to shoulder, and ordinary citizens filling every available space. They hadn't come to witness scandal. They had come to stand behind a man they trusted. And then he entered, Colonel Marcus Hayes. No longer the figure on the pavement, today he stood tall, composed, and unshaken. Cameras flashed as he approached the podium. The room hushed, waiting. Marcus's voice was calm, steady, yet carried the weight of truth. No badge, no gun, no uniform gives anyone the right to take away a man's dignity. We do not serve power. We serve justice, and justice will always win. For a moment, silence. Then the hall erupted. Applause thundered through the room, rolling like a wave of affirmation. Some stood on their feet, others raised their hands high, united in approval. What had begun as an act of senseless cruelty ended as something far greater, a community finding strength in unity,
a corrupt deputy humbled, and a veteran reminding everyone what leadership truly looks like. And for those who watched, whether in that hall or through the glowing screens around the country, the message was crystal clear. Real strength isn't measured in tasers or weapons. Real strength is measured in restraint, in respect, in honor. And Marcus Hayes, soldier, commander, and servant of his community, embodied all three.